my name's Reverend Sandi Hood, and I bring you greetings from Carolina Caring. COVID-19 has left in its wake many things, one of which is the stark reality that most of us, individually and communally, are experiencing grief and loss. Some of us are grieving the loss of people that we love, and others of us lament a series of losses: the loss of community, the loss of a job, the loss of life as we knew it, or the loss of an opportunity to make a much anticipated memory, such as a wedding or a graduation. We're glad that you joined us today as we discuss collective losses with a panel of knowledgeable leaders. We'll also take a closer look at the role grief plays in coping with and adjusting to crisis and loss.
Hello everyone, my name is Carolyn Thompson and I am Director of Community Relations with Carolina Caring. So nice to be with you today. Today we're going to talk about death and grief. COVID-19, as you know, has brought on its own set of situations, many of which are unfamiliar to most of us. Many people are concerned about things that they have never had to be concerned about before this pandemic. These concerns range from one end of the spectrum to the other, and they may include worry about how to pay rent, how to pay other bills for your own personal safety, mortgages, loss of sense of safety in your own homes, social disconnections, and personal freedoms. Job security, as well as financial security. All of those things we have felt as a loss. Sadness, too, over how this pandemic is affecting not only you here at home, but everyone across the globe. That, along with the fear and anxiety about the future. Nothing is the same anymore. Weddings, concerts, meetings, travel plans, school events, sporting events have all been either canceled or altered and does not resemble normal. The pandemic has forced many to process both individual and collective grief in the face of an uncertain future, which we are powerless to control. Grief is a deep sorrow, an extreme, troublesome feeling, high anxiety, sometimes annoyance even, misery or sadness. Grief can occur following any type of loss. It could be after a divorce, loss of a job, retirement, empty nest, and particularly death. It can be an isolating experience that can be very much magnified during what we're in now, this pandemic. Anticipatory grief is a type of grief that occurs before a person suffers a loss. Let's say if a person has a prolonged illness that will more than likely lead to death, they may suffer grief and loss long before that person actually leaves them. The person who is ill, their family and friends may experience a grief and loss over a period of time as they emotionally prepare for the actual death itself. Some of you might be experiencing anticipatory grief. You are grappling with the loss of normalcy, but also you may be feeling that greater loss is yet to come. This is called anticipatory grief. Psychologist Dr. George Bonanno stated, "We grieve not only for what's missing, but also for the ways in which those losses affect our senses of self. Grief sometimes feels like a loss of identity." He goes on to say, though grief is difficult, it helps to recognize that it's natural and useful, particularly when one turns inward. It is okay to feel grief over what we're losing. When we do that, it allows us to let grief do its job so we can move on. We must name and claim the grief that we are experiencing. Cultures all around the world share a common element of grief, that of mourning. Whether they are mourning the loss of a job, home, resources, or social connection, being near and close to a person, being able to touch and connect with them is very important. During COVID-19, some of those connections have been lost. There may be family members in facilities, and you are not able to be with them, to visit them, hold their hands, and share closeness with them. Then there are family members who have lost their battle with an illness they have been struggling with for some time. Imagine that you're dealing with the pandemic, but also life continues to happen. But it happens without their family member at their side. COVID-19 has wreaked havoc on the normalcy of grieving and mourning such losses. The act of saying goodbye to a loved one often begins well before a funeral or a burial. We hold a loved one's hand, have meaningful conversations with them, affirm or reaffirm a bond, and for some, you make amends. Being able to practice these normal acts somehow lessens the blow of a loss. Due to COVID-19, with strict isolation measures and social distancing in place, many people are missing out on these final farewells. These precautions are necessary to slow the spread of the disease, but these precautions also make it difficult for mourners to come together to grieve. The acts of preparing food, visiting with family and friends, attending a wake, yes, those things we are missing. We typically would gather with family and friends to share happy memories, to cry, to support each other. We are supposed to take care of a bereaved family. These acts of caring for the family helps connect the family who's present, even though the person they are mourning are gone. Dr. Cami Fletcher states, one of the things about mourning and grief in African American communities is that we've been stereotyped so many times in life, but in death, we are able to have our humanity. She went on to say, you have people in community who are able to show who this person was by getting up and making statements about them or playing a slideshow about the person's life. The fact that we cannot gather and grieve is really a big blow. Yes, the coronavirus pandemic has wreaked havoc on many of these and other rituals. Losing a loved one, as hard as this is, compounds during this pandemic. There may be feelings of guilt and regret because you could not be there to support your loved one during their final moments. The grieving process usually involves a period of saying goodbye after the person has passed away, a step that is not granted to someone when their loved one dies of a contagious illness. This brings about feelings of lack of closure. Social distancing prevents friends and families from gathering to hold a traditional funeral, memorial, or other religious observance, leaving family to have to come up with more non-traditional methods of honoring their loved one. They may ask themselves, is this what my loved one wanted? Am I honoring them in a way that will please them? So many families and friends are unable to attend a service due to restrictions. Therefore, you may have some what-if questions. What if the pandemic never happened? How would the service of remembrance have been for my loved one? What if this pandemic had not happened? How many people would have attended the service? What if my loved one is not at peace with how we have had to remember them? Those what if questions, along with feelings of guilt, some may experience, again, a lack of closure. Funeral, memorial, and last rite events, including graveside services, are utilizing technology, which is an imperfect substitute for an in-person embrace. Being in close proximity with friends and other mourners triggers our bodies to produce hormones that help us to cope. When unable to feel physically closeness to say goodbye and grieve with other mourners, some people experience ambiguous loss, and with this, it is very difficult to get closure. Along with this comes feelings of frustration, helplessness, hopelessness, and disempowerment. The question now becomes, how can we construct new rituals to help us cope with death and dying during the situation that we find ourselves in, COVID-19? We are faced with finding new ways to honor the life and legacy of a loved one, as well as cope with our own grief. We may have to look to psychologists, to therapists, faith leaders, and others to find new ways of coping. Dr. Bonanno stated, people will have to do their best to find ways to honor their loved ones while being apart during the pandemic restrictions. He suggests creating Facebook pages, emails to people, sending letters, asking people to share their stories, honor loved ones during memorial services on group video calls, even virtual funerals. Having to come together in a virtual space is new, and that act of novelty can break us out of our old traditions and make us feel and connect in different ways. However, we know this is not true for everyone, but we also know that you can be creative in finding ways to honor the life of your loved ones. While these methods may not be comfortable for some, it might be very well all that we have for right now. These are some ways to help you cope with grief. Take care of yourself by practicing self-care. Take time for yourself. Give yourself time to deal with the grief. Reach out to friends and loved ones and find support. Check in with others regularly. Talk, if you must, to a mental health professional. Remember, your feelings are valid. Give yourself permission to feel the way you're feeling. Treat yourself with kindness during this difficult time. We light this candle to acknowledge those whom we've lost.
Thank you for joining us here on today. My name is Reverend Dr. Donald Gray. For the next few minutes, I will attempt to tell you of what people are going through, experiencing grief and loneliness over the loss of our shared community and the support system as we have known that COVID-19 has done to us. COVID has caused us many and much grief and stress. Carolyn Thompson has already mentioned and talked earlier about the many restrictions that have been put in place for our well-being. These restrictions may have led into not being physically present for our loved ones when they have been sick or even at the end of their life, as well as the ways we have adapted when we have lost those who we really, really do love. Because so much and so many changes has taken place, we are in a climate that we have never been before in our lives. These times can be very frightening. These times can be unsettling. And it also can be challenging within our mental health. For in most cases, they have caused additional grief for many of us. For example, the loss of interaction. We are social creatures, and we are social creatures by nature. For you see, we were created to be in relationships one with another. And in a time of a crisis like this, or extreme change, such as in this disaster or in this pandemic that we are dealing with, it is very natural for us to want to gather and comfort one another in times like these. Yet social distancing has forced us to be apart from our friends, from our families, for months and months and months on end. Most people, both young and old, have communities that they have been part of, or that have given them that emotional support that is so needed in times like these. It also gave them their personal identity, and it gave them a sense of belonging. For example, you and your friends used to meet regularly. On the weekends, you sat around, you jived, you laughed, you had fun. You tell stories, you just tell stories that grandma used to talk about, or you would go to eat. You go out and eat a steak. You will go out to the movies. Suddenly, that sense of community has been broken, and you're feeling the loss of being all together alone. Or perhaps you and the extended family gathered every weekend just to share just a simple meal. Getting together with family was not only a long-standing tradition, but it also gave you that sense of who you are and where you came from. With this outbreak of COVID, you and the family are not gathered anymore to minimize that risk of someone getting sick. But this has created more grief for many of our family members. Let's talk about our children and what they have lost. Children also have been impacted by the loss of their connectedness with this COVID. They have lost their community also. In addition to stress that come along with this virtual education, children are grieving, not seeing their classmate and not seeing them on a regular basis, not being able to play with their friends. Children are used to a regular routine. Children may also have an added grief if they themselves have a loved one who have contacted this coronavirus. They also worry that someone that they love may get sick. We know children oftentimes have difficulty articulating what they really are feeling, especially when it comes to the loss and grief of a loved one. So it's important we be mindful of their mental health. As a parent or guardian, you must be aware of the changes in your children's behavior. You must pay attention to their mood swings. You must pay attention to the disruption in their eating patterns. If you have any concerns, I want you to reach out. I need you to reach out to a guidance counselor that's in school. I need you to reach out to a professional counselor that may be in school. Carolina Karen have bereavement counselors that are here to help you. Maybe there's a pastor that you know, a friend, or anyone that can help our children during this pandemic. There's also another segment of people called the older adults. Let's talk about it. Coronavirus has also impacted our what we call senior citizens, but it has affected them in several different ways. Because seniors are over the age of 65, they are much at risk for this complication if infected. But because of this, most have been isolated from their families. They've been isolated from their social community, more than just the other populations that we have spoken about earlier. Physical touch is one way we assure our loved ones that we are concerned one for another. Yet there are seniors that have not felt the touch of a person in many, many weeks, in many days, and many months. Because of this, senior adults are discouraged to attend their worship service to participate in the volunteer activities that they have been so used to in the past. Not to mention, they're not able to engage with their social peer groups. This has led to dramatic increase in them feeling loneliness and them feeling depressed and them even feeling the anxiety of this great pandemic. These feelings also have been exacerbated by sitting in front of a television for companionship while watching alarming news stories and feeling powerless to change. If you are a senior, it would help you to maintain a sense of routine, engage in regular exercise, and start to move around just a little bit. Limit yourself, if you can, from looking at so much of the media, the breaking news. Everything is a breaking news. Reach out to others to maintain contact in a creative way on a regular basis, and practice that mental health is important to all of us. If you have a loved one who is a senior adult, consider bringing them a meal, consider sending a card, or just dropping a book off, and maybe just contacting that loved one and say, hey, I love you. Grieving has caused the loss of our engagement within our faith community also. This is a very important thing within our faith community. If you are a person of faith, matters not what your faith may be, you also may be grieving the loss of gathering within a church, a family. If your church has returned to gathering for worship, there's no doubt in my mind as pastor that our worship service has changed. It looks very different than it did pre-coronavirus. For instance, if you love to sing in a multicultural person gathered in a surrounding where church with a moving experience with singing beside one another. Now you cannot do that because of social distance. You got to find yourself 6 feet, at least 6 feet apart from someone. This limits our intimate friendship and our relationships that we have one with another. Then there may have been, for over the years and years and years, you had Sunday school where you met with classes, where you had those individual touches and interpersonal relationships that you had one with another. Friends you haven't been able to see for months on top of months. For many, gathering together and worship together and comforting one another and gathering, we felt appreciated. We felt supported. We felt like we belonged to something that was bigger than ourselves. For some, that comfort has been replaced with grief, and that comfort has been replaced with fear. That gathering forever changed. Feel as though their faith family has forgotten about them. Church may be able to survive this challenge that COVID-19 has brought. It has brought financial situations to some. It has brought psychological to others. Some wonderful and creative ideas also have come out of necessity from our local congregation. If you have any ideas of how you can better engage, please share with your pastor that he also may be able to help you to make it through this great pandemic. Let me just wrap this up by saying, we are grieving so many things right now. The death of someone we love, the loss of interaction one with another, the loss of our routine life experiences, or the loss of community where we have gained so much support through our social activity down through the years. Yes, but there is hope. There's always hope that we're about to turn this country, acknowledging that first thing you got to do is acknowledging that we are grieving. Your feelings are natural, and this is a normal situation. But by acknowledging this, you can work to move this grief forward. Give yourself permission to grieve. This is what you must do. You must give yourself the permission that I am going to grieve because of the loss of some of the things that I have spoken about. Share your feelings and your people that you're missing them right now. Make sure that you stay connected. Reach outside your comfort zone and connect with folk in different ways than you've ever connected with them before. In addition to phone calls, try contacting others through Facebook, Messenger, FaceTime, Zoom, and even writing a simple letter. If you're intimidated by technology, as I am sometimes, reach out to that young person and ask them to help you by doing things that you've never done before. This country was built on greatness. Our Constitution states, the preamble of our Constitution stated that we the people, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote, do ordain, and establish this Constitution for the United States of America. As our forefathers have fought for our Constitution, I believe that you and I will be able to make it through this pandemic. God bless you. As we light this candle, we do it in the loss of the ones in our community.
As Carolyn mentioned before, when we lose someone that we love, it's only natural that we grieve their loss. But you know, grief is hard work. It affects us emotionally, but it also affects us physically, cognitively, and spiritually. Our grief certainly can be very complicated right now with COVID and by the situations that you've just heard. Just a few of the normal reactions often seen with grief include sadness, numbness, guilt, anger, crying, feeling helpless or hopeless, mood changes, forgetfulness or an inability to concentrate, sleep disturbances, weakness or fatigue, headaches, loss of appetite. You see, grief affects all aspects of our being. It's our body's natural response anytime we experience loss. It occurs when we lose someone, but it also occurs when we lose anything that we're attached to. It can also be helpful to know a few things when you're grieving. Grief is not linear. It does not follow a particular timetable. And the feelings of grief are unique for every person. Grief has often been described as a roller coaster with ups and downs and twists and turns, and it's very unpredictable. Sometimes people forget that we can grieve even when we haven't lost a special person. Some of the grief that we are experiencing right now, individually and collectively, is related to what we call ambiguous losses. It's called ambiguous loss because losses aren't always so clear to us and to others, and because it doesn't seem to have a clear date of closure and resolution. Does that sound familiar? With COVID-19, our country collectively and individually is grieving ambiguous losses, but we might not realize it. We've not been able to put our finger on that feeling we're experiencing, and we don't know when it'll end, and that can be very unsettling. Ambiguous loss can also include the fear that there are more bad things to come. We're also experiencing living loss with COVID. Experiencing living loss is a normal response to sudden change. In this case, it's the sudden change of living life as we knew it before the pandemic. Again, grief is not only normal, but it's essential because it helps us adjust to life as it was to life as it is. Some examples of living loss are unmet expectations, the way COVID has impacted our plans to make memories such as weddings and proms and graduation, a much longed for vacation, anniversaries and family reunions and college experiences. We're all grieving what we were not able to see fulfilled. Other losses may be loss of identity because you felt like you were what your job was when you were employed and you no longer have that job anymore. A loss of security. Just working from one's home can make you feel insecure. A fear of losing your home. A fear of getting sick. Loss of friends. Loss of entertainment and social life. Loss of independence and freedom. Loss of control. All of the losses I've mentioned are valid losses and valid causes for grief. But remember, everyone's grief looks different. What may cause one person to grieve may not impact another person the same way. So what can help? It can help to actually name our grief feelings because it helps us move through our grief. Maybe that's just vague anxiety or sadness or sleeplessness. Talk to a trusted pastor, a friend, or a counselor. Also try journaling, texting, writing things down. Get it out. Online support groups are available to you. Just reach out. Most of all, remember grief is not permanent. It evolves and changes and softens over time. We light this candle to acknowledge our grief and our ambiguous and living losses.
My name is Kim Dowell, and I'm one of the chaplains at Carolina Caring. In today's final segment, I want to acknowledge that there are people who might be facing a spiritual struggle because of the pandemic. Maybe for some, spiritual matters have been a lifelong struggle, but in the time of COVID-19, the questions might loom very large for many of us. Where are you, God? How can you let this happen, God? God, do you even exist at all? Is it okay to question God or have doubts? There are certainly examples in the Bible of that kind of honest struggle. The beloved 23rd Psalm declares, "The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want." But in Psalm 22 we read, my God, why have you forsaken me? Why are you so far from helping me, from the words of my groaning?" And then Psalm 13 cries out, "How long, O Lord? Will you forget me forever? How long will you hide your face from me? How long must I bear pain in my soul and have sorrow in my heart all day long?" Finding these and other passages in the Bible reminds me that questions have been part of our human struggle forever. Comfort and a measure of peace can come just in speaking the questions out loud. It's okay to express the ups and downs of our faith. God can definitely handle it. Truthful, pain-filled conversation with God is still, after all, simply prayer. It's also okay to tell other people about your struggle. I know from many of my conversations in my work as a chaplain that people can be filled with doubt, but feel afraid to tell others because of how they might be perceived. Being vulnerable and sharing with a trusted person or group can lead to a feeling of relief because you find out that you're not the only one. There's a story in the New Testament that reflects how I feel sometimes. A father wants to have his son be healed by Jesus. As he asks for healing, he says to Jesus, "I believe, help my unbelief." I like this story for two reasons. First, the man is honest with Jesus about his doubts. And second, his question or his statement paints a picture of the ups and downs that come with faith. It's natural, it's human. We're doing the best that we can. By the way, Jesus does not scold the man for confessing his doubt. 2020 is a year when it seems we need faith more than ever. Faith points us in a direction of hope and also love. We need something to anchor us. We need a belief in goodness beyond ourselves. How can we find God when God seems distant? This is my opportunity to be vulnerable with you. I am on the journey. I am with you. Some days are better than others. I want to feel God's presence. I hope for connection and meaning. I long to have answers to the hard questions of life. What can we do to strengthen our faith muscles? One of the ways I find connection with God and others is through helping. Reaching out allows me to represent God's love and presence for someone else. When someone feels loved or feels a prayer has been answered because of something that I have done, I am the one that gets to feel closer to God. Another connection place is beauty. God can become more evident when we seek beauty or when we do something creative. Strengthen your faith by taking a walk, listening to music, or maybe even dancing, watching a sunset, buying yourself some flowers for your table, painting, writing in a journal, just going out and counting the stars at night. It might sound old school, but God is often revealed through creativity and beauty. One more very simple but profound way to feel God's presence is to look for love in the world. God is described as actually being love. When I experience being loved or I observe love in action, God is present. Even if it's hard to believe in God, I can believe in love. There is a story in the Old Testament about a man named Jacob who is out in the wilderness alone. During the night, he begins to wrestle with someone he believes to be God or an angel. What I love about Jacob is that he absolutely refuses to give up the fight or quit the struggle before he gets a blessing from the Holy One. Jacob chooses simply but profoundly to not let go. No matter where you are with your faith, I encourage you to be like Jacob. Hold on. Be vulnerable with God when you are struggling. Find ways you can be the answer to someone else's prayer. Look for beauty. Look for love. And most of all, refuse to let go. God will not let go of you. May you find peace, companionship, and blessing in the struggle. We light this candle to acknowledge our spiritual challenges.
Thank you for joining us today. We hope that you've learned a few things along the way. Most of all, we hope that you realize that you're not alone in this journey. Carolina Caring is here for you should you need us. We have an excellent staff of trained bereavement counselors that are available for you, regardless of whether or not you have a loved one with us. Please call us at 828-466-0466 or visit our website at www.carolinacaring.org and check out our online support groups. Thank you and many blessings. We light this candle to acknowledge our collective losses and to acknowledge that we are one.